Do cultures really feel the sting of appropriation?
Does censorship achieve its goal or do the opposite?
Is YouTube siding with anti-vaxxers? Yippee-ki-yay, microscopists. I'm Casey Rochford, and you've joined Kitchen Sink Microscopy for yet another great deep sink dive in which you have, of course, already subscribed to the channel for. Why don't you go and then like the video right now and share it with your friends?
Yeah, go do that right now. Oh, wait, no, watch the episode, then go do that. I'm Eric Rosenblatt, and Casey and we write our own music. So chances are there's going to be one of our songs at the end of this episode, or a piece of it at least. And yeah, so you can, we'll probably have a link to where you can get the full songs down in the description or somewhere. So, Casey, what shall we talk about today?
Well, we're on YouTube, and YouTube has been a little bit of a punk lately, removing a bunch of our videos from several seasons ago out of the blue. Actually, I think they've already tried to remove them in the past, and it made it past the appeal stage. Well, now it didn't, and the ones in question all have something to do with our interview with an anti-vaxxer, which I would add a link to, but hey, the video's not there anymore. And yeah, YouTube doesn't really let you link to things that aren't YouTube, so you know
that's true.
It is, however, on patreon.com/ksmvidcast, where you can pay money to see the banned episodes.
Oh yeah.
But you know, like, after a careful review of 5 minutes, they stand by their decision and take the video down, even though we refute all the points that he came up with. Like, the only thing we let him do is talk, like a decent human conversation should allow for.
Yeah.
And then we talked back and gave him like actual science.
Well, to
think about.
That would be kind of like if YouTube removed, those people that kind of respond to flat Earth videos or something, and they play clips and then they respond and counter.
I'm surprised they don't.
I know, it's crazy. Like,
well, more surprising is the fact that like that anti-vaxxer, his channel is still there. Like,
yeah, exactly.
How the hell does he even still have the right to be on YouTube if they're so stringent? Oh, yeah. Unless they happen to be siding with anti-vaxxers.
That's a good question. I mean, maybe they are.
That might be the logical conclusion here.
Well, I mean, that is a conclusion you could draw based on the facts. Well, they do that with a lot of things too. Like during COVID, anybody that had any kind of out of the box kind of, thoughts about things, that got banned and blocked and stuff like that. And it's like, well, people should be allowed to speak their mind. I mean, and especially because there are people all over the place, just like with flat Earth or the moon landing hoax people. Like, there are people of science and reasonable mind who produce videos that counter these wackadoodle videos. And I think that's important. Like, people, you should be allowed to say whatever you're thinking, even if you're wrong.
Yeah,
people do that all the time. I mean, really, you go through YouTube and there's all kinds of stupid people saying stupid things all the time. Well, just like us. um, and it's like, I why who knows who's right, like I don't know. I don't like it. It feels really, I don't know what the word I'm thinking of
I
is.
understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to mitigate real damage that can be done with misinformation,
Well,
which
I
I
think
mean,
I'm
that's not the way to do it though.
no,
Like,
no, I'm actually totally okay. If you do a video that involves flat Earth, you'll have a little like box underneath your video that
yeah,
kind of provides facts, basically, right? Like a
right.
link to Wikipedia or whatever.
And that's how
And
they did it with COVID too.
yeah, yeah, exactly. That's fair. Like, put that down there. Put like a link to, hey, if you want to know the current state of understanding of this thing, here's where you go to get like scientific stuff, and just slap that underneath the videos if something is suspect, right?
Mm.
But don't like block it. Because I mean, the thing is, it's like it's like with any kind of conspiracy theory. Sorry, my chair is still broken, so I'm kind of leaning here, and it keeps. I feel like I'm going to fall off of it. Um, but as with any kind of conspiracy sort of thing, if it just like reinforces the people's views if their video gets removed or blocked or something,
Yeah,
like, or shadow banned or whatever. It's like, oh well, see, of course I must be right.
right.
you know
Uh, it's really frustrating because there was a lot of good a lot of good stuff in those episodes, and one of them was just like a 2 minute like retrospective clip at the end of season one,
mm-hmm.
like 2 minutes out of an hour, let's say, and they banned the whole video, like removed the whole video over that. Like, and
Oh,
let me tell you, that was a lot of work to edit.
yeah.
So I'm really kind of pissed off about that. Like, uh, I know you've started like a kind of like a mirroring
Mm-hmm.
thing. Where is that again?
That's on Rumble.
Rumble. Okay, I
Yeah.
almost said Bumble, and I knew that wasn't right.
I think
Uh,
that's some kind of dating site or
yeah.
something. So yeah, let's not send people there. But yeah, Rumble actually it is pretty open. Like, I mean, for the moment, that like people, there's in fact Etienne, the guy, the anti-vaxxer guy, he has a channel there,
Huh. Of
and a lot of people
course
put
he
their
does.
stuff up there because they don't restrict speech there, except for
Hmm.
stuff that's like obviously bad, right? Like criminal things and stuff like that. That they'll
Mhm.
block that. And you as uh, a channel owner, essentially, you can kind of control what can and can't be said there and stuff like that, even in comments. So that's kind of cool, actually, because I don't think YouTube even does that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right,
We just don't bother with that because we kind of have the philosophy that people should be able to speak their minds about stuff. I
yeah,
mean, the point is that yeah, like if you believe something and you believe it to be wrong, uh, telling you to shut up just drives the wedge in further. It makes you think, oh well, they must be trying to silence me. I
yeah,
must be correct. But if you present them with alternative arguments, eventually you got to hope that the wall crumbles and they'll finally just be like, oh, hey, critical thinking. That's
yeah.
interesting.
I mean,
Because we don't teach that in schools the way that, Europe does.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, and that can take time, and that's okay. Like, you're not going to
mhm.
change someone's mind with just like a simple stating of facts once.
No.
It requires conversation back and forth,
Mhm.
and people, that that's the important thing. And like, if you shut people down, well, yeah, then they're never going to change their mind.
Yeah. And that only takes once to do quite a bit of damage,
Oh yeah, yeah,
like, we never had like anything taken down, even though we've covered some real controversial stuff like child rape, like
mm-hmm.
that didn't get taken down.
Nope,
Um, and then they take this down, and it's like, well, it's hard not to think of what the reasons might be behind that because, yeah, like YouTube, or let's say Google,
Mhm.
might actually be kind of siding with the anti-vaxxers.
They might.
The anti-vaxxers are taking over.
Turn the frogs gay. Oh man.
But
Yeah,
what do we do about that? I mean, like,
I don't know. And I mean, YouTube now is such a black box organization. Like, I, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of got a mind of its own. Like,
yeah, and not necessarily like a gifted mind, let's say.
no, no, not at all. Yeah,
Yeah, I wish I wish it weren't so necessary to play the game on Google's field.
yeah,
Like that's kind of where like all the popularity is, and but I mean, like that's kind of a thorn in our side too, because it's a really vast ocean of content,
hmm,
um, almost impossible to get noticed. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe this Rumble thing will work better. I
it's a smaller community too, so that's kind of nice.
I remember years ago you were talking about an alternative platform. I,
BitChute probably.
oh, that might have been it. Yeah, and I remember like the guy that came up with it had like some weird shady stuff going on with him. I don't remember exactly, but
Yeah, I think Rumble's a lot less shady.
huh.
Feels a lot more legit. Well, and here's another thing that YouTube censors all the time that's really frustrating. War footage.
Huh.
Like, okay, there's a lot of people I follow who are like kind of providing updates on the Russo-Ukraine war, and they can't even show anything, like even an explosion or something like that YouTube won't have it. Like,
Yeah.
most of the content creators that I follow, they'll blur out anything that's like, like dead bodies or something, right? Obviously gory things that, okay, that's fair. But just showing Jesus, well, Floyd's not happy about that. He's gonna try to censor us right now. But yeah, like they can't even show anything now. And it's really frustrating because it's like, okay, you go to these news channels and like the Sun, I think I've been following a lot, and they show stuff, and that's like YouTube doesn't block that.
Uh,
But like a casual YouTuber, like, oh yeah, you can't show that. It's like, well, why? This is like actual stuff that's actually happening. We should be allowed to share that.
so 3 days ago, I got an email from Google. Just everybody got this, I think. And in February of 2024, so probably by the time this episode comes out, they're updating inappropriate content policy to clarify the definition of sensitive events. Oh boy.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
So, I mean, they go on in like a few paragraphs to basically say anything that might trigger someone or hurt someone's feelings, you can't talk about.
What?
So there goes our whole channel.
Mhm. Well, I mean, literally everything might trigger someone or hurt someone's feelings.
Right?
Like anything can. Like what? In fact, I was just watching a video this morning. I
That
just got a
offends
record.
me that you were watching a video this morning.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody I've never seen before was talking about doing this video about why he's buying DVDs, like box sets of shows instead of like the subscription services.
Hmm.
And some of it was like he's like, well, there's a lot of like everything's heavily political now in new shows and all PC and blah blah blah, and also certain episodes of shows are they don't show them anymore because they're sensitive or
Yeah.
something. And he's like, well, if everybody gets triggered now, like if I watch a show and I don't like it, I'll just turn it off.
Yeah.
Like, just turn it off. Don't watch it. This idea that we need to shelter everybody Oh my God, it's like, what kind of world will we have? It's this whole, like, the helicopter parenting, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you do that, your kids are going to grow up without the ability to negotiate uncomfortable or dangerous situations, because there's always, big brother up there to help you. And I think that's where we're headed with things like YouTube. Like,
We
what?
really are. Yeah.
I mean,
Uh,
it's same thing. Comedy. Remember when comedy was like edgy,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
like, like, people would poke fun at, geez, Floyd, at everything. Like, what happened
Well,
to that?
cartoons and stuff. Like my wife and I have this game we like to play. We'll turn on Disney Plus and go watch an old like 1930s Mickey Mouse comic cartoon, and at the beginning it'll say, uh, we've decided to keep this episode in its entirety, but just please be aware that the times were different and certain sensitive topics maybe, like blah blah blah. Anyway, and basically the game is watch the thing and try to figure out what pissed somebody off, because it's harder than you think.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, you can, of course, the times are different. I mean, if you're watching an old Disney cartoon from like the 40s or something, and it's kind of, caricaturing Japanese people or whatever, because they had those kind of propaganda uh episodes or something. Like, well, yeah, I mean, that was the sentiment at the time. You don't have to clarify that or warn somebody, because it's like, well, this is something, yeah, this is from the past. Like, that's the thing. It's like that movie Song of the South too triggers people.
yeah. I
Like,
mean, like,
okay, I saw that movie when I was a little kid, and I don't know, and even I've recently rewatched it, and I don't find it to be like, it's not like, I don't know, it's not doing anything bad. It's like, well, it was actually kind of progressive for the time, if you think about it.
I don't know. Is that
Zip
a
Zippity doo
movie?
dah. Remember that
Um,
song with Uncle
yeah.
Remus? Like, it well, also another thing, it was revolutionary for the time also, because it was, I think, the first animated show, or the first movie to incorporate animation with live action, like,
Ah.
blended together. I mean, the music is great too. Like, but that apparently is that's bad. That movie's terrible. It's awful.
So
It's like
ridiculous. Like, yeah, if you draw a Japanese character with, you know, the
exaggerated features.
occidental fold on the eyes and a certain hat, that's offensive. But all anime, which we used to call Japanimation, which I think
Mm,
is an awesome word,
yeah.
um,
Hmm.
all of their characters that are like, white folk have these giant eyes. Like,
Mhm.
that's okay.
Well, yeah, it's exaggerated features. You totally
Yeah.
can do that. That's part of animation, is expressing those things. And, you
Hmm.
know, like,
I mean,
it's an artistic style.
caricature artists down on the waterfront now are probably like YouTube police are probably going down there and like physically removing them from the scene. Like,
Yeah.
you're offending people with your caricatures. And
Yeah. Oh, it's so ridiculous. Yeah.
yeah, like this whole society right now is getting absolutely out of control with being offended. Like,
Mhm.
just shut up. Just stop it.
Yeah.
Like, pull your panties up and move on. Like,
Yeah.
because yeah, like, just like what I said, that probably offended a bunch of people. But you know what? I don't give a shit,
Uh-huh.
because it really doesn't matter
Well,
if you're offended,
the thing
like
is, a lot of the offense in question is like secondary offense. It's like you're
oh yeah.
being offended on behalf of another person.
I'd bet
So
90%
many
of it
people.
is.
In fact, there was a YouTube video, a YouTuber, I can't remember who it was, But he put on like a classic like Mexican outfit, and went around and asked a bunch of like non-Mexican people, "Oh, what do you think about this outfit?" And every single person said, "Oh, it's offensive. Oh, that's offensive." Like, oh, cultural appropriation. And then he went to an area where there were a lot of Mexican people, like, and asked them, "Hey, what do you think?" And they were like, "Hey, that's a nice outfit. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
it." And he
Yeah.
asked him, like, "Is this offensive?" And they're like, "No, not at all." Like, it, where the offense is fabricated essentially, because it's like, okay, well, if actual Mexican people are not offended by somebody wearing this kind of exaggerated Mexican outfit, well then why are the other people, like non-Mexican people, offended? That actually offends me.
Yeah.
It's like,
Here in Germany, I can still get Native American Halloween costumes. Uh,
mhm.
I see them right now because Carnival is coming up in next month,
Mhm.
where people dress up in all manner of different things. And went into a store, and like most of the costumes were all taken, but there were like a stack of Native American ones. And I mean, like, uh, I don't want to say people here are offended by that at all, because I don't think that's the case. But I wonder if some of that is trickling over from America, where oh, I'm probably not supposed to wear that.
Probably.
But part of me wants to just buy them all and then fly over to the US and sell them for a profit.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Hey, get your Native American costumes.
Well, and
Probably
that
can't get them in the stores anymore.
yeah, I don't know the whole Native American thing too. It's like, okay, well, go to any tribal lands today, and you don't see people dressed up like that at all.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
maybe ceremonially at
Ceremonial
some
stuff.
point they might do stuff, but like on the day to day, they're wearing the same stuff everyone else is wearing. Um, and so like dressing up, if you're not Native American, dressing up that way should not be offensive. It's not cultural appropriation. I don't even understand that too. That's kind of, because it's like
That
at that
word
point
makes no sense.
we're all guilty of cultural appropriation.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So it's like, oh, what? So now the Native American people, if they wear like this, they're culturally appropriating the Western society. They should be sitting there in like buckskin feathers and like it's fucking stupid.
There's this Facebook personality that I have our page following, just to kind of rile me up on certain issues sometimes.
Hmm.
She's kind of this hipster humanist, Meg Slay,
Hmm.
and she posted something where she was um, kind of coming down on people for going a little too hard on cultural appropriation, but she kind of, I don't know, like missed the mark, I feel. So she was like, cultural appropriation is ick, but cultural blending is really important, and blah blah blah, and like went through all these reasons why like it's totally okay to experiment with other cultures and blend them into your life, and this and that. And I was just like, you just explained what cultural appropriation is in most people's eyes, and said that cultural appropriation is ick.
Yeah.
And then went to say, well, like, why cultural appropriation is great. Uh, like,
That's I mean, yeah, kind of defeating your own argument at that point.
yeah, it's like,
Which it's like,
do people even know what these buzzwords mean?
I don't think so. In fact, I think most people that are in this kind of mode, that get triggered by stuff, they just want to be triggered by things. So they're looking for stuff. And
Yeah,
like it's obvious. It's just gotten to this absurd level now where literally everything can be triggering or has some kind of flaw in it, and is part of the patriarchy or white supremacy or whatever. And it's like, just chill.
yeah,
It's not, sure, there's things out there. Well, it's a moral panic basically that we're
yeah.
undergoing. In fact, several overlapping moral panics going on. But yeah, I mean, are there things that like that? Sure. Yeah, there's racist people. Yeah, there's people who make fun of people because of certain features. Yeah, sure. The whole world isn't like that. Most people are just regular people. They're not an ist. Um,
Yeah.
oh God. Well,
It,
oh man.
it really is kind of an epidemic of well, like you said, a moral panic, but it's so out of control. Like I kind of worry that I don't know, maybe it's a sign of the times, like life is just generally harder for people and shittier for people, and maybe they just need a bad guy, you know?
I That is true. Well, I actually think that the big problem is life is actually too good. Like it's we're it's so good that we no longer worry about the stuff that our ancestors worried about. We're picking like these random little things that, I mean, imagine 400 years ago, people wouldn't waste their time being concerned with like whether someone's dressing up a certain way. They were
Yeah.
like more concerned with, I don't know, staying alive. The winter is coming. Do we have enough supplies and food to weather that? Like, oh shit, my kid got ill and is dying. Like, that's the kind of stuff people used to be concerned with, and now we don't really. It's like life is pretty cush by and large. So I think, and maybe this is like innate human kind of thing, the struggle, right? Like, if you're not, like, humans enjoy the struggle. Like, that's what games are all about. Like the challenge of beating a game, and going in like nightmare mode on Doom or something like that. Can try like that. That's what we enjoy, that kind of thing. And I think maybe in the absence of real things, that real challenges, we make them up to have
Mhm.
something to struggle against.
Yeah, most of these, if not all of these, are made up. I
Mm-hmm.
I would I would like to issue maybe a challenge, like if somebody is told that they've culturally appropriated something, we'll ask that person, is this part of your culture? If no, has somebody of that cultural realm informed you that what I'm doing is offensive to them? And
Mm-hmm.
if so, how many uh, of that culture agree with that particular person? Like if you were to actually follow the breadcrumb trail of who's offended, it would pretty much all be like white people that have like dyed hair and like strange colors and like thick rimmed glasses and like if effectively it would just all be these virtue signaling people
Yeah,
being like,
the
look how,
breadcrumb trail would end with them. It would
yeah,
never lead back to the people that you're appropriating, which
right,
I kind of take issue with that, because it's like, well, that's what people do. Like, what? Think about it. Like, Rome, or whatever, like conquering lands and stuff like that, and like they would incorporate the culture that they took over into their own culture, and vice versa. Like, people would be like, hey, this Roman thing is kind of cool, so we'll start doing what they do because it's kind of neat. Like, look at Japan today. Japan prior to World War II was its own thing. um I mean, it was kind of getting a little westernized, but it was still very much Japan. Now you go there today, and it's like basically like it is here
yeah,
in the US. Like, people are basically the same. Like, oh, yep, there's a McDonald's down there, like,
yeah,
it's just a regular place. Everybody's got the same stuff, and like doing the same, wearing similar clothes. Like, I, it, that's what happens. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, I do think it's important to preserve a bit of the heritage of a particular culture in some way.
uh-huh.
I like, maybe have your days where you dress up and do something or whatever. Like, yeah, certainly preserving language and culture and stuff, that's important, but humans don't exist in isolation when they're together. Like friends, you meet somebody, right? And like, I don't know, maybe like I wasn't into metal until I met you, and you introduced me to some of those bands, and I got really into them, like Typo Negative and stuff. Like I'd never heard of them before. Well, I had, but I never listened to their music.
Yeah.
And I listened to October Rust, and I'm like, holy shit, this is
Yeah.
great. And like your shirt, Megadeth, right there. Like I wasn't really into Megadeth, but now I am, and like you probably weren't into the stuff that I was into, but like because we shared our space and
Yeah.
our hobbies and interests, it's like, oh yeah, should you never listen to electronic music and strictly just only Megadeth all the time, or
Right.
or is there room for sharing of things, like
Mhm.
I, I,
Well, the
I got
Native American thing is the most infuriating because there's no caricature aspect to any of the symbology that has been used with, like, like when you mention, preserving culture is important. It's like, well, it's kind of what that is, right? Like,
yeah,
like you said earlier, like you don't see those people wearing that on a daily basis anymore
no.
because, well, it's 2024.
Well,
Why would they?
and this is the thing too, is when people dress up like Native Americans say, like dressing up in that kind of costume, they're not doing it out of disrespect. They're doing
Right.
it out of respect. It's like people in the U.S. think it's cool. Like we admire that culture. In fact, so much so that counties and street names and all kinds of things are named after, especially in Washington State. All the different counties
Right.
and cities and stuff, like they're named after Native American terms. Like we didn't do that because we're disrespecting the culture. We obviously did it out of respect. And
Mhm.
I was when I was a kid, there was a thing called the Y Indian Guides. It was like a YMCA thing that was a separate little thing where you'd kind of like dress up and we did like these bonfires, and we get together like at somebody's house and do these things. I can't quite remember all what we did, but it was like very much a Native American themed sort of thing. And it was kind of like, I guess a little bit is sort of like the Boy Scouts in a way, kind of. You
Uh,
learn skills and things like that. But there was a deep sense of respect for the Native American culture within that.
yeah.
And like, I was like enthralled with that culture. I love it. Like to this day, I still do. And
I
like,
tell you what, I've never seen anything negative about Native Americans. And
nope.
even like old Westerns where they often are the bad guy, it's like, well, they're just the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like there was no like over dramatization of anything, like, and
Rarely were they ever portrayed as like dumb. If anything, they were just portrayed as dangerous, like super dangerous, because they were that good.
right.
Like, why do you think in those westerns everybody carried guns?
Hmm.
Because it's like, well, fuck, if if we just come out, just with nothing, they're gonna kill us.
Yeah.
They're like fierce warriors and stuff. I mean, it's like they were kind of portrayed like the Klingons are portrayed in Star Trek
Hmm.
to a large sense. And a lot
Yeah.
of those westerns too were very respectful towards the Native Americans. Actually, that's another one too. There's a movie called Zulu. I think it came out in the 60s or something, and it was all about like this British encampment and their encounter with the Zulu people in this battle that essentially they kind of survived, like only barely. So it was like the Zulu warriors with nothing but their shields and spears against like advanced for the time British soldiers with their rifles and stuff, and they got spanked. And then, but even then, it was like extremely respectful to the culture. Like it portrayed the Zulus as like uh, in a good way, right?
Yeah.
And even in the end, when the British were ultimately pseudo victorious, they it was kind of like they regretted having to do that, having to like kill all these warriors. And
Yeah.
oh man, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just how people, you know, generally put things in buckets, like headhunters, for instance. Uh,
Mhm.
my grandfather had an actual picture of an actual headhunter that he had met.
Hmm.
And I remember him telling the story that he was really glad that they hated the Japanese because, like he has a picture of them with like a spear with Japanese heads on them, and they were totally cool with the Americans. And it's like, but do you think the head hunting like defines who they are? Do you think that's like, like central to their entire culture?
No,
Probably not.
no, it's just
They were
one
probably just
aspect.
like, hey, we need to scare these motherfuckers off because all we have is spears. Let's
Mhm.
put their heads on here, like.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Well, and
I'm
yeah, a
sure
lot of
they
those,
have a rich and deep culture that goes way beyond and has nothing to do with severed heads.
absolutely, yeah. And that's the thing. It's like I think all cultures have a lot of depth to them, and like it's more than just the superficial. But I think one of the problems with where we're going currently in our society with all this like triggered people, like it's so superficial. Like it, I don't know. It's not like a logical, deep sort of concept where like that where this is derived from. It's this like extremely simplified sort of thing that it's like well it and it's also focusing so much on superficial details like the color of your skin, your country of origin, all these things like uh, none of those things actually matter. Like what I mean that doesn't define a person any more than what clothes you have or the color of your hair or whatever. It's like I, I don't know it's just it's almost like we're going backwards.
Right. Like I'll just throw this out as food for thought for people. Um, if you think wearing a Native American Halloween costume is somehow disrespecting and making fun of Native American culture, yet you'll happily laugh at pictures of people in the 70s and the clothes they're wearing with the big, collars and the afros on the white people and the bell bottoms. Well, why is it okay to laugh at the clothing that these people wear and not those people? Like,
Yeah.
where are you drawing the line there? And I guarantee you, it's all based on skin color, like which is
Yeah.
superficial and stupid.
It's totally stupid. Like I
It's like, oh, if you're
in a
white, we
way.
can make fun of you. That's fine. But
Yeah.
if you're not white, it's totally not okay.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Totally not
and
okay
that
to even like respect that culture.
I
Just shut up.
yeah, honestly, I'm actually more offended. Like, I mean, I'll use that term, I guess. More offended by people, these like moral panic participants,
Yeah.
um, having this outrage over this stuff, these superficial things. Uh, that's more offensive to me than someone who happens like they are like overtly just racist, right?
Yeah.
Like it okay, the person who's just naturally like for whatever reason they're racist or something, they don't like a particular type of people or something. um that to me kind of makes sense. Like, okay, that's their upbringing, maybe their family, it's been in their family for a long time, or their place where they live, and that's just how they're ignorant, right?
Yeah.
I can forgive that. I can't forgive somebody who is not ignorant, who is well educated and has been exposed to all these things, yet is essentially doing the same thing. They're
Right.
racist too,
Well,
but they're
nobody
like
is more,
intentional.
yeah, nobody's more nitpicky about racial differences than people trying really hard not to look racist.
Yeah. Yep.
Like,
Absolutely.
they're like pulling shit out of thin air and saying it's offensive that nobody even gave a thought about. Like,
Yeah.
especially people of that particular race. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I
Well, and like I said earlier, it's like it's a secondary
mhm.
offense. Like they're being offended on behalf of somebody
Yeah.
who probably doesn't give two shits about whatever. Like, well, like the YouTuber that like went to the Mexican people and they were
Yeah.
like, "Hey, that's cool," you know? Like, well, then why are these other people being offended? Like,
It
why?
doesn't
Nobody.
matter. It doesn't matter what skin color you have. You being offended by something does not mean everyone sharing your shade of skin tone is going to be offended by the same thing.
Exactly. Well, because that in itself, that kind of concept is kind of
Racist.
racist in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just assuming that because like these superficial features are shared amongst a populace that they're all the same, like that's pretty fucking racist.
Oh yeah.
Like like, I've have known and know a lot of black people, and no two are alike. Like, I, in fact, like there was a black guy that I knew back in when I was going to Pierce College, and he was like super into anime, and he was the one that actually introduced me to Akira, and he was like a super nerd. And then I had friends, black friends, like in high school that were like thug life people, and you know, like absolutely night and day different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. They all had this characteristic thing, this thing that's just the skin color, amount of melanin, but like they couldn't be more different. Like it, this idea that this is like because you have this particular thing, or like you could say that about white people, right? Like, oh, they're all this way. Really? You really think that? Like, do, I mean, there, oh, like,
Yeah.
oh, this is a hive mind or something. We're a bunch of bored. Everybody is the same, and they think the same things, and everybody has the same views or something like that.
It's a sad state uh, our society is in that this is even a thing. Like, I'm glad that there's like comedians that speak out against this. Ricky Gervais is really
Mhm.
vocal about.
Dave Chappelle too.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle. He's great. Like he's really good. Like he really gets like a bad rap from people,
Mhm.
and there's that like no substance whatsoever to their arguments. But it's amazing what people will just jump on the bandwagon for because someone that they trust hates somebody. So they're
Mhm.
like, well, I hate them too, you know.
Yeah.
Like
Oh
just
yeah,
stop and
the
think,
most.
just stop and think about that
Yeah,
and tell me you're not a bigot, you know, like
I know. Bigotry, man.
really.
Even politics, right? In the U.S., it's like people draw these kind of broad conclusions about everybody that because they have like they vote a certain way. Like what?
Yeah.
Really? It's just it's the box you're ticking on a piece of fucking paper. That doesn't mean you share every single feature as the next person. Like, yeah,
You know, it like politically, I might sit wherever I sit, but the reason I have a problem with people that say they're Republican or Democrat or, you know, whatever, Christian, even, you know,
Mhm.
like whatever box they put themselves in, that tells me a lot about what's guiding their principles. Like they're just going with the flow of whatever they're told, you know, like
Yeah.
this is what we believe. Okay, I believe that, you know, like
On all
what?
sides. No, you're
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
yeah,
like that. It's kind of like a tribalistic mentality
yeah.
almost. Like, yeah, you're right. And the problem with it, I guess the danger, I suppose, culturally speaking, is that when you join this cult, I guess, you're expected to adhere to whatever the trend is. And if you are different, well, you're going to be shunned or worse, you know, like, well, think about US politics, right? Imagine a Republican that's like, you know what, I think I'm in favor of abortion being legal. How that would affect them, or you know,
Uh-huh.
like I don't know, something like a Democrat being like super pro 2A or something, how that would affect, like how they would be treated by their
Yeah.
group.
These people pop up from time to time and then quickly disappear
Yeah.
from
when 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 it really should be totally okay. Like, I would like to see a lot more of that, because humans are more colorful than just blue and red, right? There's a
yeah.
lot more going on underneath there. And this idea, well, it's kind of religious. Like, it's like, you know, if you are a member of a church, a Christian church, right? And you know, you just come out there and say, yeah, well, you know, I think I don't know, sex before marriage should be perfectly fine. Or yeah, I'm okay with abortion being legal or whatever. They're going to be like, what? Oh, no, that's not right. Like,
Yeah.
but it should be. You, like, people, because otherwise you're essentially being like squeezed into this mold that somebody else decided. It's not you. And there's no room for any kind of deviation or nuance, I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
And the only like rebuttal that they can come up with are all predicated on logical fallacy
mm-hmm.
because there is no good argument for what they're, you know, for the hill they're dying on.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true. A lot of these things are not derived from logic, like, and
oh no,
can't be even justified logically.
none of them are derived from logic.
No,
Like,
it's emotion.
mm-hmm.
Well,
It,
and that's the thing too. It's like the people, like we're talking about these like outrage people that get triggered and stuff. That, I don't know where it comes from. You know, maybe it's like an emergent property. You get enough people and it like feeds into itself and builds its own system. But they like, yeah, that you are expected to be outraged at at the same things that everybody else is outraged by. So it's like,
mm-hmm.
if you're part of this tribe and people are like, "Oh my god, you know, oh, look at that. That's disgusting," or whatever. They don't like it. And you're like, "Yeah, whatever." They're going to be like, "What? You're a bigot now. You're not one of us." It's like,
Right.
what? Like, and so it like reinforces itself. And I
Yeah,
don't know the
I
way out.
experienced a lot of that. I experienced so much of that. Like over 10 years ago, I started running in this like atheist circle thinking like, ah, these are my people, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like we believe, you know, in critical thinking and logic and stuff. And oh, I was proven so wrong about that
Mm-hmm.
assumption. Because so many of them were on this um side of the fence of, you know, what I came to call hipster humanism, where it's like you're just trying to be like cool in your circle about like how not racist you are, that you're actually racist.
Yep.
Or, whatever the bigotry topic might be, and I started to like see all this hypocrisy and holier than thou mentalities and religious thinking
Yep.
and atheists. People.
It's shocking how much religious thinking there is amongst atheists, and that's
Right.
sad. I know quite a few atheists like that are not like that, but I mean the most vocal ones. Well, yeah. And
Yeah.
again, if you don't subscribe to the group think, then you're going to be ostracized. Like they will not tolerate any like deviation of thought. I mean, and I'm not just saying atheists. I'm just saying like this type of system,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's not to say like it would be a logical fallacy to say that this shows that atheists are wrong about what they believe. It has absolutely nothing to do with what they believe.
No.
You can be completely right about one thing and a total idiot about another.
Yep.
And being an idiot about that thing has absolutely no bearing on anything else.
Well, yeah, it's like saying, oh yeah, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he tried to I don't know, repair his car and couldn't do it and had to call in an expert to help him. So therefore, he knows nothing about astrophysics. Like
Einstein couldn't tie his shoes.
Yeah, exactly. Like no, yeah, you're right. People can be correct and wrong at the same time.
Yeah.
Like it.
Yeah, time and again, I'm just reminded how much we need critical thinking taught in school.
Absolutely. And
Please.
Open conversation. Going back to kind of the origin of what we're talking about, like we need dialogue. We need people to communicate and express themselves and counter argue. And, we need that discussion. Like, I don't like where we're headed, where it's kind of like, well, it's like the church, essentially. Some system decides this is the way things are, and it has to fit this mold. Otherwise, like, oh, you're an ist or something.
Yeah.
Like, no, we need like, well, and we were trying to get Daryl Davis on the show for the longest time, but it's like he didn't just say, "Oh, those stupid racist KKK people," I'm just gonna yell at them and beat them up or whatever. No, he befriended them, and through doing that, like he changed their minds. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
Like you don't do it by shouting somebody down and la la la, I can't hear you, and punching them or whatever. Like that's not gonna fix the things, the issues.
So often I told people that were all a bunch of Nazi, told people about Daryl Davis, and they were like, yeah, I've heard of him, but like that's like shifting the burden to the victim. And, like we can't expect Black people to defend themselves against Nazis. And it's like, oh, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, I'm talking about you. Like,
yeah,
you white boy. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Punching another white boy for your perceived, like bucket he or she exists in, like, because a lot of the times these people would just punch somebody because they saw it on a telephone pole. Like, hey, this person's racist. If you see them, punch them. Okay. What?
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't even like research it or anything.
That's your evidence.
Like, yeah. That's ridiculous.
That's what you're going to go off of and like commit acts of violence against a complete stranger over.
And what will that accomplish?
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if so, now right, the person, you're still a fucking dick.
Yeah. and you haven't changed their mind. In fact, you probably reinforce their views.
Oh yeah.
They're like, oh well, of course. Now I guess I must be right because all these people, like, uh,
I
no,
mean,
the best way.
Trump brought out a lot of the atheists from under the dark shadows, but they stayed out because of these people punching them.
Mhm.
They're like, oh, we were right. Like
Yeah,
they're trying to shut us up because they're just angry or, whatever. Like people justify their actions by your reactions.
sure. Well, and that's like unnecessary escalation. Like the state of being an ist, right, a bigot, right, is a neutral state. Like if you just simply are, right, you're just sitting there and in your mind you see somebody walking out there that you don't like, and you're just like, oh, I don't like that person. Like, okay, nothing nothing has changed in the world. But as soon as now, if somebody comes and looks at you and you're like, oh, you're a bigot, you're an ist, we don't like you, and then they hit you, well, now they've stepped it up. They've like escalated the situation. Now it's a physical confrontation where before it wasn't. It was just simply in your head. You thought this way. Like, okay, but now it's ramped up to this level. So now, of course, it's basically combat at that point,
Mm-hmm.
when it didn't have to be. All it is people thinking things that are probably stupid and ignorant. Like, that's not a crime. There's nothing wrong with that. Every one of us, every single one of us is guilty of being ignorant of something and probably has some kind of bias or bigotry based on that. Like everyone, there is no exception. Every single human being has this property within them. And so, I mean, we just kind of have to come to terms with that. And like, okay, well, the way you solve that is exposure and education and discussion. When I grew up, when I was a little kid, like I had a huge problem. Like I didn't, I was like raised in a Christian family and stuff, and I didn't like gay people, and I thought that was wrong, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't until later when I made friends with people who were gay that I was like, oh yeah, what's the issue? Like now it's like, oh yeah, they're just people like anybody else. They just
Yeah.
do things a little differently and whatever. I have zero problem with it now. And it wasn't because somebody, some gay person came up and like socked me in the jaw that I was like, oh my God, I must be wrong. I need to change my ways.
Right.
No, it was because I made friends with them. I hung out with them, like that that's how you do it.
Another thing that really needs to stop is shaming people for their past. Like,
Oh man,
and like
that's a big
that
one.
is not helping anything. Like if somebody said something 10 years ago and it pops up on the internet now and everybody cancels them or whatever, it's like, how do you know that's what they feel like now?
Yeah.
Like, did you even bother to check?
Well,
Like,
think of how ludicrous that is. It's like saying, I don't know, shaming someone for like when they were 7, they didn't know how to
yeah,
do like math or something, right? Like,
yeah.
but now they're like in their 40s. It's like, yeah, well, I've since learned how to do math.
It
You
takes
know,
it takes
like,
away incentive to change your mind
yeah,
for the better
sure.
or at all.
And those things too, like the ignorant past can serve as sort of a frame of reference for progress,
Yeah,
right? Like, oh, hey, look at how far I've come. I used to think this way, and now I think that way because I went through a process of I don't know, enlightenment or something, right?
right.
Like I'm fully admitting that I had a problem with gay people back in the day. Just like back in the day, I thought the whole creation story made sense. I don't believe that. Both of those things are completely not what I believe now. And
Yeah.
should people like talk shit about me because, oh yeah, when you were in high school, you thought like that Jesus was a thing, and the earth is only 6,000 years old? Like, no, I was in fucking high school. I would what
Yeah.
we're not like the culture I grew up in was very focused in Christianity, and I wasn't really exposed to that much of the other ways of thinking. So of course, naturally, like, you're going to believe the things you were brought up with. And it's only by being outside that system and being enlightened that my mind changed, and slowly, but I mean, here I am now, and I don't believe those things.
Yeah.
But that it's like, okay, well, just because I didn't know that back then, or may have said stuff, stupid things, doesn't mean like that I think those things now, or people should be making fun of me for that. Like, that was a long time ago. People change.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this whole idea that people need to be completely like ostracized or cut off from your life in general is pretty drastic. I
It
mean,
is.
like, okay, if you have nothing but personal interactions that are 100% negative with a particular person, that's totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't have to justify that to anybody if you don't like somebody.
You don't have to be around them.
Yeah, but
It's
also,
perfectly fine.
like if that person extends an olive branch and says, "Hey, like I get the vibe that, we're not getting along and I want to fix that." Well, like don't feel like you have to like die on that hill either,
Yeah.
like
Well,
and
because people can change, and
yeah,
maybe times are different, and maybe somebody saw the error of their ways, and like, oh yeah, and they should able be allowed to do that, to
yeah.
change. you know like,
I mean, we base things on what we experience, right? Like
sure.
maybe a lot of these people that are well-intentioned but kind of bigots have actually witnessed and experienced a whole lot of ism in their life, whatever that ism is. And that's just their personal, experience. But like, it should be a goal of everyone to open their eyes to, like the good in the world
Yeah.
that does exist and probably exists in a large proportion of the people that they are unfairly kind of targeting.
Well, yeah. I mean, because if you think about it, most people in general have a relatively myopic understanding of the world. I mean, there's billions of people on this planet, and most people have only interacted with a very tiny fraction of that population. And then the ones that they haven't, like, some of the information that they're probably basing a lot of their views on is sensationalized stuff from like the media or TikTok or YouTube or whatever, like this stuff that's like not really uh indicative of everybody, right? It's like cherry picked stuff to, I don't know, evoke emotion or get clicks or something like that.
Yeah.
um that's very common. I mean, the media for sure, the news, yeah, like they're rarely do you ever see the news report stories of like good things happening. Like, oh, hey, guess what? There were no accidents today.
Yeah.
Like, no, they're only going to report the stuff that like gets eyeballs on the screen, because people like to watch a train wreck, essentially.
Yeah.
Um, and so, they're not going to report like, oh, look at this cat that got rescued out of a tree or something. Like, no, it's going to be, oh, there was a shooting, da da da, interviewing people, and yeah, it's
And I
bullshit.
mean, like the stories you do hear about that are probably there just to create kind of a drastic comparison. You know, like, here's
Well,
like the one heartwarming story and all this death and tragedy.
yeah. And now clowns. Yeah. Like, well, here, like going to kind of expanding off of what you brought up earlier, like the how about the sins of the father thing too? Like you people judge you on your own past, but what about your past that wasn't even you, that you had no
Right.
control over, right? Like your grandparents or something like that, or I don't know, people that lived in the same country that your ancestors did or something. That, oh, now you're also responsible for that. Like, what do I have a time machine? So how can I be responsible for something I wasn't even around, I wasn't alive when this happened, right? Like,
Well, I think that's what the concept of privilege was created to kind of justify.
yeah,
The sins of the father whole mentality had to be justified by privilege, because that's like, oh, well, you were actively benefiting off of what your ancestors did to these poor people.
mm-hmm.
Well, sorry, but no.
Well, but here's the thing. I mean, in a way, everybody's benefiting. Like, it's not just exclusive to like one particular group
Yeah.
necessarily. And I mean, that can definitely change too.
Well, it's
Like,
all relative too. Like,
yeah,
you know, I in high school I did running start, and I had to, pay for it with my dishwashing money, and I was looking at scholarships, and there's all these scholarships for just being black. And I
yeah,
was like, what?
yeah,
Why? Why? Like, how's that fair? Like,
yeah.
like, I mean, fair aside, like, why should that be the thing that determines whether or not you get an education?
Well,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, and a lot of people would say, oh, well, they're historically, I guess, black people were kind of repressed in this country. But that was a long, long, long time ago, a very long time ago. And now, very few, like, I mean, sure, there are people who are descendants of former slaves, but there are also a lot of black people, say in the US, who had no history of that, who came here after that had already ended, long after the Civil War, and they're here now. So are they also repressed somehow, retroactively, or something like that? That makes no sense.
right.
And then, like me, right? Like, oh, this whole reparations thing and stuff. People are kind of building up now. Like, okay, well, my family comes from Scandinavian countries. We had nothing to do with that at all. You might look at me and be like, "Oh, you're white, and so you're therefore you're a descendant of some of those evil people from back in the day." Like, no, no, we were like way up there in the cold north while that was going on. We weren't even here, you
Yeah.
know.
But the
Like, what?
concept of privilege paints this picture that just because you have white skin now gives you all the benefits and privileges that came from that oppression in the past. And that's not even true. Like, I mean, if it is true, there's no empirical evidence to support it.
No, there isn't.
Like,
And look at how many desperately poor white people are there in the US?
yeah,
There are a lot. Like, if that was the sole determining factor that of your success, then why are there so many like desperately poor white people? Like, there are literally in the US white people living in cabins with dirt floors today, 2024, right now. Like, where's the privilege?
yeah,
There isn't any. It's a fabrication.
right.
it's like,
If it were real, we could walk into a government office and say, "Can I have some money, please? I am white, as you can see." And they'd be like, "Oh yeah, sure. Here you go. Here's some
yep,
privilege money." That's
yep,
what privilege is. Like,
exactly. Yeah, and then
like
they would deny it to a
lack of
black.
certain hurdles is not the same as privilege. It may
No,
seem that way, but
no,
it's totally different.
exactly. And maybe there is a bit of bias, like overall, in that regard, but it it's not really a concrete thing.
Yeah.
I think everybody, like in the US in particular, everybody really has the same odds of doing well. Like it's
Mhm.
not like, oh, you're black, therefore we're not gonna, you can't buy a house, like, or live there or get this job or something like, or whatever, or because you're Native American or this and that. No, it largely nobody gives a shit. Like if you're gonna buy a house from me, if you're gonna buy my house and I'm selling it, if you have the money, I'll sell it to you. Like that's it. That's all that matters. You got money, here's your house. Like no one gives a shit. I'm
I
sure
saw
it's
a funny comic yesterday. It was a racetrack, and on the inside tracks there were women, and the outside tracks there were men. And in front of the women, there were all these obstacles of like hung laundry and dirty dishes and a vacuum cleaner and stuff like that. And it was just like a clear path for the men. And of course, they were trying to say like the same distance has to be run, but they've got all these obstacles in the way. Men have nothing in their path. But they would have done better to put the men on the inside track because the outside track is actually technically further to run also.
yes,
So,
yes, it is.
you know, so like that just kind of outlines like what mountain you might have to climb that another person doesn't, has absolutely nothing to do with some other obstacle that might be in their path that isn't
I,
in yours.
I think everybody in one way or another has their own obstacles, right? It's like
Absolutely.
it's really easy to like look at the surface level and make assumptions about how something is, maybe based on, I don't know, stuff someone has said or whatever. But it's like, okay, until you've actually walked in someone's shoes, you don't know. You know
Mhm.
nothing about them. And so you can't make these kind of blanket statements, just putting everybody in the same box. Like, oh, all men have it super easy and women have it so hard. Okay, maybe this is kind of like, I don't know what, there's probably a term for it, but like assuming that things today are the same way that they were in the past a long, long, long time ago.
Mhm.
Like assuming that those things that, yes, a long time ago, women did have it more difficult. It was very hard for a woman, say, to um, get a job somewhere or be in a political office or something like that, or be a cop or whatever. But now it's not a thing. Like for the most part, I mean, I guess the military is probably the last thing in the US at least where it's like, well, okay, frontline combat, they don't really like women there. But that's probably going to change. Um, but like to assume that because it used to be a certain way that it still is dumb.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
And
sure, are there remnants of some of that? Yeah, to an
yeah,
extent, but like, I mean, it's changing. We do make progress. Like things change and improve. We have to allow that and accept the fact that we're not at the finish line yet.
yeah, it
Like,
has to happen in the time it takes. You
yeah,
can't really rush it.
no,
Um, yeah, there's also this idea that you know a cis white male can't understand what it's like to be on the other side of privilege, but that's absolute crap too.
mm-hmm.
Like because if you want to say that there are privileges out there that some people have and others don't, that hold people back. The people that it's really holding back are the ones that work hard and strive for this goal and do, like, check every box and do everything and still get passed over for the promotion or the raise or, you know, whatever it is, based on something. And you can never actually prove what that something is, but you might have some inkling of an idea, you know, like, oh, that person, you know, is buddies with the boss, or, you know, golfs with them or whatever, you know, like, there's always some kind of way that any of us can probably empathize with real, actual privilege and being on the other end of that, you know.
Yeah, I really, honestly, the only privilege that really exists in any kind of tangible way would be socioeconomic status, how much money you have at your disposal, and your connections, who you know. Those are the two biggest things. Like, and that has nothing to do with what you look like or your ancestry at all.
Yeah.
Like, it has everything to do with who you know and how big your bank account is.
Yeah, because who you know and how much money you have is either someone tells you how to get something done, or you pay someone to get something done.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Or you know someone who owes you a favor who can do something.
Right. Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And that's how privilege works.
Yeah.
And everybody is equally capable of grasping privilege when it, you know, happens upon them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh man. Damn, this is
a good one, but
this is really
piss.
Okay, well, this is probably we're in at about a little over an hour, so I think that's good time, because I think I do too. So yeah, man, wow, really good. So well, everybody, thanks for sticking it out with us. If you're still here, and if you are, you're probably hearing the song that's coming in at the end.
Now, I'm pretty sure YouTube has already removed this video.
Yeah, probably.
So thanks, YouTube diligent reviewers who absolutely watched the episode all the way to the end. Thank you for deep sink diving with us and everything that is causing you to ban this episode.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do you get the sarcasm dripping off of that?
Yeah. Well, everybody, stay peaceful, stay inquisitive, have conversations, don't shut people down, keep an open
YouTube.
Yeah.